So look, there we are. What do I want to talk about? Everything really. I want to talk about how digital is changing, not all the detail of it, but just how some of the major steps that are going to hit us sort of now. And we're already struggling to deal with the things that we've been hearing about already in organization. Command and control systems were designed normally by the military, and the Industrial Revolution borrowed the structures, and we haven't moved on very much. So totally agree with Matthew's commentary about that, and also those three types of people. And I might cover that right at the very end, something practical to take away. So there we are, that's what it's about. How good are we at thinking about the future? Well, if you ask Marshal Foch in the First World War about aeroplanes and whether they have any military value, he said absolutely of no value whatsoever. And pretty much now is almost the only way that we project military power in the world. In fact, we bought aircraft carriers that we can't afford to take our airplanes to places so we can go and bomb them. So in terms of all of our money being spent on things that were conceived to be useless only 100 years ago, that pretty much sums up almost every technology we come across. We really don't recognize it for what it is when it first turns up. And we do a lot of work with big corporations, and in every corporation we work with, we see exactly the same response in terms of looking at new technologies and understanding the potential impact on business models, and organizations find that almost impossible to come to terms with. So there we are. Another one, the telephone, it's vaguely useful. But if you've gone back to 1876, at the height of their success, you've got Western Union, who were the world's largest telephone company, if you like, using telegraphic communication. They said the telephone was of no commercial value whatsoever. And as a communication device, it was inherently no use. Well, brilliant. So the telephone's merged with the computer, and now that's changing absolutely everything we do. And even that itself now is just on the cusp of changing again in terms of what it is and how it works and what it does. So even if you're expert in your field, it's very hard to see the next step without involving your friends and mates and people in other worlds to come and help you digest what the impacts might be. Finally, you look at a company that I much admired until a couple of years ago, who understood change extremely well. They were a tree company, they were a rubber company, they were a copper cable telegraph company, then they became a telephone company, and they did very well. Then they didn't notice that people had stopped buying telephones and were buying small computers in their pockets. And they tried to flog old phones to developing markets who wanted small computers in their pockets. And they lost 80% of their share price. So brilliant. So that was a small, tiny change. The same device, perceive it differently, you get a different outcome. And in their case, not that jolly at that point. So tin cans, let's talk about that for a moment. Tin cans, fairly basic sort of technology. It revolutionized the Royal Navy. It allowed our ships to go further, explore new places, by and large, sort of dominate them when we got there, but the idea was to help people stay healthier longer and stay on your ships longer. 1810, the patent was released on that. When do you think the first tin can opener was actually patented? 6 months? 1915. That would be quite a long time, 105 years before we opened one. That's a reasonable approach. 1820? 10 years? Okay, well, it was 48 years before the first patent was released on a tin can opener. So for 48 years, we sailed the high seas and didn't open the tins. Well, no, we didn't. We took our dagger out, or our sword, or our saw, and we hacked our way into it. And the whole point of this is not just a vaguely amusing story. It's the fact that when a new technology comes along, we still engage with it in the old ways. It takes us a long, long time to realize that something different has actually happened, and we need to respond to it in a different way. And in most firms, you will find people are using their daggers and their swords and their axes and bludgeoning their way into new technology. So take that idea home, if you like, in terms of helping people see things for what they are and adapt what you do as a consequence, not just try and struggle on and wonder how to deal with this annoying thing called social media, but bizarre scenarios. Okay, most risk comes from strategic risk. I'm a marketer by background. I was embedded in the Institute of Directors last year for 6 months as their marketing director, and I merged IT, marketing, and their publishing division because we wanted it to be about content for the members. And the only way to get content to people these days is through technology, even though the members don't really want to deal with it that way. It's the sort of modern way of doing it, isn't it? We learned that about 25 years ago. It's the sort of modern way you move information around. Anyway, that was an interesting scenario. It was an organization that was struggling to realize things had changed. Most risk is strategic risk, not financial, not operational, although we spend all of our time focused on financial and operational risk. It actually is doing the wrong thing. And as Drucker said, most companies fail to thrive, if I'm being positive and using nice terms, because they haven't noticed their business models changed and they want to carry on in the same old ways. And in fact, if you look at the Global Fortune 500, 1955 that was formed, so it's about 60 odd years, 70 years old, not very old. 429 of those 500 are no longer with us. So all the evidence tells everybody you're not owed a future, and yet everybody operates as if you are owed a future forever. It's completely bizarre. This is the Institute of Actuaries figure. How more deep thinking and factually based can you have the Institute of Actuaries say that's why companies fail? So there we are, that's how they fail. So let's talk about tech for a few minutes. Number one is, okay, a bit of a marketer, so I'll do 3 horizons, why not? Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3 in terms of tech, and I'm sure you do this in your own firms anyway. The current one, we manage what tech we're using to try and get the most value out of it, and we extend and defend the boundaries of using that. Number 2, if we're into using new technologies or tools or methods, we will build those emerging business platforms and business models. And finally, in Horizon 3, we will learn to experiment and give ourselves options and choices for the future. And hopefully, most firms are doing something vaguely along those lines in whatever tool you use. But if you go back to 2008, and I enjoyed Matthew's comment, you'll see that the example I'm going to use is Apple. In 2008, their core product was the iPod. They'd just launched the iPhone, which introduced iTunes, which is why they were successful. And 2 years away was still the first iPad that got the whole apps economy going full sway within businesses. So those 3 technologies took them to different places in a very short period of time. And of course, if we had had that insight and that knowledge, we might use those tools differently by looking further ahead. So if that's basically it, the point of greatest confusion is quite fun. It's here, it's now. It's not when they come to pass, it's actually almost now. And you don't see that sort of behavior in many organizations in terms of how tech is going to change what we do and how we do it. Okay, so Horizon 1, and I'm sure you're dealing with all of this anyway, it's all about mobile and consumerization of IT, so who's using it, it's bring your own devices, it's cloud, or more properly these days, it's the intercloud, the connection of clouds conforming around each other, the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything, if you want to use Cisco's terminology, telematics, everything connected through devices. Wearables, of course, are going to come with profusion over this year and next year and the year after, and they're going to change shape, and they're going to be measuring different things, augmented reality avatars and 3D printing. So all of those you're already dealing with, yeah? Yeah, of course, it's easy. Then, of course, you've got holographics and automation of everything, including almost everything you do today, is being automated by some tools in the future. So if you're a knowledge worker, then actually many of the sort of more mundane routine things that we do today are going to be automated, and all of these are changing. I'm not going through the whole lot because it'll take too long. So all of these are changing, and then in 3, of course, you've got smart dust, programmable materials, which is dead cool. Quantum computing, you've got more power than you could possibly shake a stick at to do more things than you could possibly want to do. And of course, we'll still want more computing power when it arrives. So that's the nature of technology. And all these other things down here are quite fascinating. And this is the point, this is the point when we finally get to be able to print human organs. And we're only about 5-6 years away. We can print kidneys and hearts and livers now, but we can't quite print the vascular system down to the smallest capillary. So very shortly, we'll be able to have replacement parts knocked off pretty straightforwardly on your home 3D printer. So that's where we're heading to with that. That might have an impact. Okay, installation is still a bit of an issue, but we'll contract out to a hospital to fit the thing I take with me. Here's my new heart, I'd like it fitted, please. Okay. So it changes the whole business model, if you like, but I'm making light of it, but actually it's fundamentally going to change logistics and many other industries. Mobile, dull, boring, we all get that. Who wants to hear anything more about that? But in my opinion, it's changed from, I keep pressing the wrong button here. In my opinion, it's gone from a telephone to a computer, and that caught Nokia out, and it's moving from a computer to a sensor. That change is going to be as profound as the first 2. It's going to change what it's for and what its primary purpose is to you as an individual, rather than just a telephone. I don't know about you, but I don't use mine as a telephone. It quite shocks me when it rings these days. It's broadly speaking a text and an email device in my old world, and increasingly it's a LinkedIn device and it's other things, because I use all of those. But of course, it's about it's about payments and monitoring the environment and helping you with your travel plans and all those sort of good things. So that's what it's going to be doing increasingly. It's dirt cheap, it's going to look different, we're going to wear it. That's basically what that's about. And sorry, we haven't got time really. So increasingly, it's going to monitor all these good things. So you'll notice that you can buy all these things already. Various devices to strap on that'll tell you how well you are or not. And increasingly we'll do more of that, and it'll be more accurate, and somebody will say, how are you? And you'll say, 87. Oh, what were you last week? 82. Oh, you've done well. So the numbers will give us confidence to know that we are monitoring ourselves. I mean, we know that'll be true because every time we give people the ability to monitor something, people monitor it to death. In the United States, when they gave people access to their 401ks, which is their pension schemes, people were monitoring it daily. It's your pension scheme for 25 years' time, for goodness sake. You can't get at it. Who cares? But people were monitoring it daily because it made them feel good when it went up, and when it went down, they were just plain in denial. So there we are. It's going to do an amazing thing. Of course, eventually, it disappears from all this clutter that we're going to put all over ourselves. And I don't know if you've dealt with smart cloths. Any of you come across smart cloths? You can weave into materials to wear on your body any manner of sensors. And those, it'll be your telephone, it'll be your computer, it'll be your storage devices, it'll be your health monitoring devices, it'll transmit information. And these things already work, by the way. We're not talking about futurist stuff here. It's a question of converting that now into products that people want to buy or even want to market. So all of this is coming. It's just the next thing in line. Mobile, more interesting in my world at least, is it's going to sort of say, where am I, what am I doing, who's around me, who can help. It's much more about immediacy of geolocation, and we get that as well. But you know, we know where we are. We're in this sort of cricket ground, and my diary's here, and I've shared that with the transport systems and what have you, and it knows who's around me because it's got my contacts on board and in the cloud, and it knows what context I'm in, whether it's the rugby club or it's a conference. I can tell by the other people around you. So the next mis-selling is going to be about context in which things were sold to people on their mobile devices because they were in the wrong place. They should never have been sold it. And that's coming soon. I keep warning the insurance companies about that. And that's one way of getting them off our back, is me warning them to stop doing it. Because they shouldn't, and the other point is you shouldn't get access to data you're not going to use. Because there'll be a presumption in the future that you had access to that contextual data. You didn't use it because you didn't know how to, but you had it on file, and in 5 years' time, as a regulator, I'm going to come after you because you didn't use it and protect your customer. So you don't take data down you're not going to use. And of course, we're going to give access to our diaries. Who's going to give access to your diaries to the train companies, the city folks? Hands up those that want to give your information in your diary to the city. Okay, well, you're all going to be in the slow queue for access to the trains and the tubes and the taxis and the buses, because cities are going to rely on knowing where you're going to put on sufficient resources to get you there. So the smart cities are going to require you. I don't know if you've been to a Disney or some such place like that. There's the queue of all the poor people who can't afford it, and then there's the queue of all the people who spend a lot of money to walk to the front of it. And I don't know how we feel about those people, probably a bit ambivalent. Some we think how lovely for them. Of course, that's not very common. But we can join that queue instantly and get to the front. In our transport systems, there'll be those two queues. Those who share information go to the front, and everybody else has to wait in the long queue in the rain. So who's going to share information in the future? Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 more. Who knows? Okay, preventative. It's all about preventative, and if you're in marketing, it's not going to be about, this is an example of insurance. It's not about compensating for loss. It's stopping people having the loss in the first place. Turning the model completely on its head. Almost every business can be turned completely on its head by where tech's going. So if you think about this, here's a street scene from an onboard camera, and in Tokyo they've already got 2 insurance companies that have already implemented head-up displays with prioritized risk assessment, warning people that there's potential danger ahead. So in future, your insurance company can stop you going somewhere to have an accident. Now, how much more we might actually quite like them if we feel like they've stopped us suffering a loss more than just fighting over how much to give us when we've had the loss. So you can completely change the perception of a whole industry by one change. Virtuality is going to be everywhere. We've had the trough of disillusionment for Second Life and all those wonderful worlds, but it's coming back. It will be better, and it will work well, and we will love to do it. Because that's how we'll get educated in virtual environments. That's how we'll build relationships with our customers when they're far-flung in these places. And if it's more human-like and more real, we will engage in that way because we do every time a technology is more real. So, of course, you've got Oculus down here, which was bought by Facebook last year for about $1.2 billion. Zuckerberg's quite keen on that, therefore it'll get the investment, therefore we'll start seeing real immersive worlds for films, for TV, for learning, for engaging with clients or friends. It's going to be pretty cool if it works. So that's pretty good, and that's something I'll cover in a moment. So here's an environment. You've got your head-up display, however that comes to. It won't be an Oculus, that's a different type of technology. But here's your head-up display, all the nauseous adverts everywhere distracting you. But over here, quietly, it's telling you there's a robbery down there a few days ago, so maybe you don't go down the road. Now again, you're going to feel pretty good. Someone's just warning me not to go down there. That happened in Boston recently for me as I was turning right. This is Boston, for goodness sake. And this lovely American chap said, don't go down there. The police have lost control for a while. So go down this way. So something head up that would tell me that would make me feel pretty warm and cuddly towards those sort of people. Of course, our virtual world's going to be inhabited with all manner of advertising and promotion, and we'll need to get used to doing that in a collaborative, permissive way. Of course, ultimately, we blend the online and offline. This is really quite exciting. I'm looking forward to this when it really happens with gusto. But here's an example. This is a Tel Aviv water park. And when you put your clothes in, you've got a wristband. And in there, you've got your Facebook account registered to it. And when you went down the slide, if you like the slide, you put your arm out, it taps the sign, it updates your Facebook account saying you liked it, and you move on. And that's the speed we're going to have to get response from our customers in the future. So it's just a nice example of how the two worlds, virtual and real, are going to blend in a way that's really quite exciting. Every piece of street furniture, of course, is going to have an IP address. Every part of our body is going to have its own IP address, so it'll know how it's doing. This is already feasible, and we'll quite like it because it'll tell us how well we are, and it'll make us live a bit longer. We'll have about 1 trillion sensors of one sort or another in the world in the next 5 to 6 years, and we'll have 50 billion IP address devices. So in terms of the amount of data, it's going to be quite a lot to play with. So I imagine you're dealing with that already, of course. So here we have it, of course, the usual facts. So we are 4 Google's worth of data every 4 days. So there's plenty of data to rummage amongst, and some of us are getting to grips with predictive analytics. And that doesn't take you very far, really, but you've got to get used to dealing with the data in a very structured way with smart people who know how to interpret it and then get the products and offerings out to customers is even harder. But prescriptive analytics gets a lot more interesting, where we actually have multiple potential responses to multiple potential behaviors of customers, individual customers. And that's when we get really interesting about potentially offering good and helpful and useful propositions to customers, highly personalized, highly timely, and it's quite hard to do, but that's coming fairly shortly. Okay, data analytics that I'm talking about and social are going to change everything. It's the biggest threat to many sort of industrial revolution era companies. They're really struggling to understand the true implications of these game-changing technologies for their firms. A lot of folk would rather go bust than actually make the change. That must be true because people find it hard to make the change. So artificial intelligence has been kicking around for a while. Weak AI is coming pretty much around about now, next 3 or 4 years. Weak AI is replacing a human being. Ray Kurzweil forecast that for about 2019. We're slightly ahead of the curve. So broadly speaking, we should see about 1/3 of all office jobs automated in the next 5 years. Oxford University did a study recently said 47% of jobs in the UK that are based on knowledge work will go in the next 5 years. So now is the time to get and understand how to be the thoughtful, the human being content of your organization as opposed to a component in a process. And human beings will have a fantastic role acting as human beings with the intuition, with creativity, with innovation, with communication, with other human beings. So the human aspect isn't going away, it's just rising in the organization, and a lot of jobs are going to disappear as a consequence. So there we are, holograms, and this is a haptic interface coming out of a screen, so you're probably dealing with these already. Have you got holographic haptic interfaces? Oh, all right, okay. These are sort of coming now. Holographic, fine, there you go, holograph. The haptic means you can feel and touch. So you have a real feeling, relationship with your call center worker. Why you'd want that is beyond me, but you know, lots of potential in some fashion or another. And often tech does lead us to rather strange places for a while, but then we see the true implications of these technologies and we settle down a bit, and then we realize if they're human-like, we tend to embrace them, well, pardon the pun. Then you've got HoloLens, which was launched, of course, a few weeks ago, which is a holographic heads-up display. And you can get some pretty cool effects with that. So you've got multiple virtual, real technologies that are converging around about now and then maturing in the next 2 or 3 years. They're going to change what we want to do. And anybody who's refining their current way of doing things and interacting with people around the current now is going to miss the point, because by the time you've implemented it, we're going to have moved on to a much more virtual real type of engagement that feels better, it's more interactive, it's more real, and we'll love it to pieces. So keeping it moving. Brain to computer already works. In Canada, they've run an experiment with pilots on planes flying the plane by thought alone. So that's quite scary. They're not passenger planes, you'll be pleased to know. But nonetheless, you don't want one landing on your head. But this works. This thought-based control works, and more natural interfaces means more people and older people and even younger people can engage with technology easier. So it means that everybody in our society can engage with new tech. So we're not leaving people out because they don't happen to be in the digital native era. Then brain-to-brain interfaces are beginning to work, and the military in the US in particular use this quite well. So we can drop information into people's heads. So this is what's being looked at by educationalists, rather than actually struggle through years and years of learning facts, which you can Google anyway, so it's pointless. So now you can actually have the whole lot dumped in your head overnight and become a brain surgeon to install the thing that you made on your printer. This is real, okay, another 10 years before it's scientifically viable, probably 12 years before it's commercially available, and then we'll start doing things very differently in terms of how we want to influence our customers, if they allow us to do that with them. So that's quite interesting. 3D printing. How many of you got 3D printers at home? You must have, a lot of you. Show of hands. You are marketers, aren't you? Okay, go and get one. They're very cheap. And you'll learn, only by getting one will you learn the amazing transformation in manufacturing and distribution. They are changing quietly. They've changed the manufacturing world over the last 30 years, making prototypes, able to interact across large geographic distances in prototyping. Now they're making end products. And end products is what this is all about at this stage in thinking. So we can print meat, we can print our food. 40% of all food in the world is wasted in the supply chain. We don't need to make more of it, we need to waste less of it. And if you can print at the point of use, you can decide to print a steak tonight and print some vegetables out. And by the way, MIT have had this working for about 5 years and works pretty well. So you can build human organs, you can build a machine gun, of course, we know all about that. People have built the first houses this way. The largest printer, 3D printer, is 3.5 meters by 5.5 meters by 5.5 meters and prints in concrete. You can print in concrete and glass and various forms of metal and steels even. And they use different technologies, but it's the same principle of being able to produce fabricated items for end use instantly on site where you want it. This is going to change all the logistics, all the supply. The idea of next day delivery is going to be laughable. What do you mean next day? I want it now. I want to see it printing at home now. I want to see it printing at my corner shop now. I want to go and get it now. So now is going to be the new, and this is going to be a leader in it. Here's an example of some shoes. You can print in amazing materials. If you haven't seen these things working, you really need to go and get to see them working. These are fully end-usable, durable type devices that can be used. I've designed my own shoes, and we're talking about half of people over a period of time will start to print out their final products, either at home or in a location that is shared with other people, maybe in a community, and that way we get convenience and personalization in the same go. And you know that anything that's convenient, anything that's highly personalized is very attractive to a lot of people. Right, that's all we can do talking about 3D printing. Then of course you've got drones, and now you've got a launch. This is a tractor, this is a real one by the way. I went to a launch, while speaking at a launch of a tractor. I have an interesting and varied life. And there was Valtra, who are a tractor company, I found out, and they're based halfway up Finland. And they launched with clouds of dry ice a tractor. And this is what it looks like. And what was really interesting, one of the optional extras is a cab for a human being. It did not come as standard, because what you do now is you put a person in one of them, and then you have 2 or 3 others following doing exactly the same thing. We've just automated. The same thing's happening with ships. You have one that's crewed and the others are clones. Cars, of course, we've been hearing about for ages. Japanese, for 20 years, have had drone helicopters spraying fields in Japan, and of course endless quadcopters, octocopters, providing delivery service that are already in use in Sydney. So the sort of technology about automation is hitting office work, it's hitting delivery systems and transportation systems, and again, challenging how we do things and who works in them. And the last thing about technology probably is worth saying, this is a hologram, so we can replace people traveling to give speeches, so I can be sitting at home and chatting to you through a holographic device, which is fine, I quite like being here, by the way. Or you can be a humanoid robot. There are many, many types in the world. This one is called Actroid One. She costs $250,000 to buy outright, or you can hire her at $5,000 a week. She speaks 4 languages, recognizes facial expression and tone of voice change, and responds accordingly. So we can get rid of people in shopping malls and other places, well, except she could be stolen, which is the other difference, of course. So these sort of people could be our staff in the future, or you can have Shakira 2, which I made up, I just thought she was prettier, or you can have Clooney 1. So you can overlap the cult of personality and celebrity with technology. So the technology folk are going to have to get used to these new marketing devices, wandering around the place, chatting to people 24/7 or until the battery runs out. So there's a little bit of change, and one of the things about these is with each new technology, first we do things differently, then we do different things. And that gap is the difference between success and failure of most businesses is at 429 out of 500 in the global 500. First we do things differently, then we do different things. Understanding the true business model impact is the game in town, and some folks love dealing with that, and some folks are less excited about recognizing that all their hard work and effort is about to be destroyed as they become, if you like, redundant in the old process and have to pick up new skills. And if you think about my example of Nokia, if you were the guy who knew how to make trees grow well, how likely were your skills to be useful to you when you were a copper cable manufacturing company? Pretty unlikely, but they managed to make those changes 2 or 3 times. It's a hard thing to do. Most companies choose to go bust or get bought out rather than actually make the change. So basically, first we do things differently, then we do different things, i.e. the framework around which we do things with the technology fundamentally changes. And I encourage you when you go back to your organization to look at technologies in a different way, not as just the thing we're using it for now, but fundamentally what can it do? And one of them is social. Social should be used by your management at the most senior level to run the business. We're in the post-email era now. It is on the trail out. It'll probably take 20 years to tail off, but we are entering the post-email era, and more collaborative, connected tools are the way ahead, and we need the top people to engage with it. And a lot of folk are worried that they won't be able to keep up with modern technology. So last 2 or 3 thoughts to leave you with, and something to go back and even engage with when I'm finished and you've got back to the office, is this last couple of comments. Oh, the first thing is, here's a comment by Kodak. They asked us to go and help them right near the end of their days. They've gone bust, of course. They couldn't believe that people wouldn't want a printout of their picture. Fundamentally didn't get it at all, and they would rather go bust. By the way, they were one of the first companies to produce a digital camera. It isn't that smart companies don't know about the technologies that are about to undermine them. They know completely about it. Whether you were a watch a builder in Switzerland, they built the first digital watches. They just couldn't bring themselves to move away from doing things the way they did them. So they'd rather go bust. And that's what we see endlessly. So web-based, externally looking, customer-centric, it's all about, of course, looking at it from the customer point of view, and Andrew and I were talking about that just a short while ago, which means abandoning our thoughts about our product and its propositions and its benefits, and it's all about listening and understanding how to solve problems for clients and interpreting our offerings in a way that can be blended to give people what they're looking for. And that's a completely different mindset, of course. Here's an example of Tesco's Home Plus. You probably know that in South Korea. Basically, they put images of their pictures up in tube stations, and people scanned them with Q codes in the morning, and the food was outside their homes, and they got home at night. So that form of outside reimagining retail is having a huge impact. In fact, you've now got these sorts of things popping up inside large corporate head offices. To stop the staff going out, you just have a panel of products that people can have, and you just click them, and then the product arrives at your desk. So immediacy, responsiveness, virtual collaborating with the real world are changing business models. We've long since not needed large sheds for supermarkets. It's a complete bizarre model. You would never invent it today in a million years to ask people to go and pick things off a store and put them in a basket and take it to a checkout and bring it home, barking mad. And that needs to change, and it is. Okay, lots of change going on, and finally, Kotter said this, look, if you don't want change, you have lots of management. If you want change, you have lots of leadership. And I know every large corporation or large company wants to relabel managers leaders, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's good to be a leader. But leadership implies a journey, because you can't lead someone to nowhere. You can manage someone to nowhere, manage what you do well. That's brilliant. Of course you must do that. But leadership is about a journey going somewhere else. If that's true, then we found a lot of people struggled with the idea of today and the future. Today's got enough problems of its own without inventing any more, is often the people's thoughts. Why on earth would I want to worry about that? I'll concern myself about that when I get there. Well, okay, let's make it slightly easier then. So let's have today, tomorrow, that you've got to think about now, and then the future. And that slightly divides it up a bit, because this we have got to pay some attention to, because we're producing budgets and plans, and marketing have been involved in thinking about new product offerings and positioning and all the other things. So this is all about the tomorrow that you guys spend your time on. So we call this Manager, Leader, Entrepreneur. And we spent a couple of years coming up with a tool to try and find out who are the managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs in an organization. Because we often find ourselves working with the main board of very large corporations, and we've seen them over years trying to change the business and failing miserably. Because somehow by the time you get to the board, you're supposed to be creative, strategic, deal with imperfect information, and you probably got there by running something very well in junior roles, because that's how you get promoted in big firms. So it was quite an interesting exercise. So that's manager, leader, entrepreneur. The managers run things brilliantly, and thank goodness for them. The leaders help people know where the new future is tomorrow and can take people with them. And the entrepreneurs have the vision and they dream about the future. And very often, certainly in large corporations, most of these people have either got fired or they've got bored and left and started their own companies. And it's important to find these people in the organization, and these people for that matter. There are no right and wrong answers in any organization. It's depending on what you want to do. So what we did was invent a tool which is at that address. It's there's no www in it. It's just elm.newworldiq.com. And there's 40 questions or 40 multiple choice options. And if you take those multiple choice options, it'll tell you what your profile and preference is. Now, many large companies are frightened of doing this at main board level. In fact, a reinsurance company in the City of London spent 2 years thinking about it, then said yes, then the CEO got fired. And he didn't get fired because he's a bad person. He got fired because the board realized they hired him to make change. They then got their profiles, and they were all deep managers who didn't want change ever. So they said, there's no point you being here. We'll never approve anything you ask for. So you're out. And they got rid of him. And they found somebody sort of in the middle to come in with. So understanding who's in the room is unbelievably vital. And it isn't that you don't want to engage with the people who are operationally brilliant. Of course you do, but not the day you're having a brainstorm. Invite them to go for a walk. Give them money to go and do something else. But do not invite them in the room. They will do their very best to scuttle it. I've even had workshops we did for quite a large bank actually, where one of the directors was going around the room tearing down flip charts of ideas that his fellow board directors had put up because he saw them being too disruptive. And when I pointed that out to the CEO, he literally invited him to go for a walk. Why don't you go for a walk while we just deal with this rather silly bit? Then you can come back and set us right later. And that's exactly the role of people who are brilliant operationally, but maybe not in the first instance getting them in the room. Anyway, that's yours to use if you want. It's really quite interesting and enlightening. You get a report and some feedback on it, and you can take it from there. So if things seem under control, you're not going fast enough, is my view of things. So thank you for that. And finally, if you go to our website, there's a report we've just launched of What's Hot in Technology 2015, and it contains, in a lot more thoughtful manner, some of the things I've mentioned today and their possible implications, and maybe what to do about it is in that paper. It's online, you can download it, have it for yourself. If you want to connect, I'm very happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening to me.